The air was piercingly cold when 11-year-old Jon Dabkowski arrived home from school on Thursday, January the 14th, 1982. Jon, along with his 5-year-old sister Melanie, resided with their mother, Janine, in a simple home nestled in the charming town of Tarentum, Pennsylvania. Janine had faced a tough few years recently. She found herself navigating life as a single mother. A Boy Scout at heart, Jon had a passion for football and baseball, yet his greatest joy came from teasing his younger sister. As Jon and his family finished their meal, a sudden knock interrupted the evening. It was none other than Jon's best friend, Gabriel Menarkin, who had relocated to the neighborhood with his family just 5 months earlier. With Gabriel's home located just a few doors from Jon's, it did not take long for them to become inseparable friends. They strolled into Jon's room and relaxed while listening to music on his stereo for a while. At around 5:30 p.m., Gabriel said it was time for him to go home for dinner and invited Jon to tag along. With the temperatures plummeting, the boys made sure to layer up in their warmest coats and hats, ready to brave the chilly air for a brief walk that would take less than a minute. Janine brought to Jon's attention that it was a school night, so he needed to return home by 8 p.m. Gabriel was part of a bustling household with his parents, Larry and Margaret Menarkin, and his 2 younger brothers, all while his mother was anticipating the arrival of a new sibling. The 2 boys disappeared completely, and their fate remains unknown to this day. Only a short distance from the home, the Allegheny River lay frozen under a heavy coat of ice, a striking sight throughout the winter. Gabriel's parents concluded that he must have chosen to remain at Jon's place rather than return home for dinner. Janine's initial reaction was one of annoyance. Jon was fully aware of his 8 p.m. curfew on school nights, yet he neglected to mention that the boys would be going anywhere besides Gabriel's home. To find out more, she called a local roller skating rink, a popular hangout for the boys, and learned from the employee that they had just left the venue. By the time it was 9:30 p.m., her anger was simmering, but anxiety was beginning to set in. She resolved to drive to the roller skating rink, hoping to run into the boys if they had merely left. Upon her arrival, however, she found nothing but empty space. After inquiring with some of the other children, she learned that Jon and Gabriel had not made an appearance that night at all. Feeling uncertain and trying to keep her composure, Janine made her way back home and reached out to the police. The police initiated a door-to-door search in the area, hoping to find anyone who might have witnessed the 2 boys after they left Jon's home. Most residents had not seen them, as the night was quite cold and few ventured outdoors. Yet, one neighbor recalled seeing 2 small boys playing near the river at Riverview Park while she was driving back from the beauty parlor around 5:45 p.m. The police found tracks that led directly to the river, but there were no signs of anyone returning. The ice along the bank was thick enough to bear weight, yet it thinned out significantly in the middle. Investigators located a hole in the ice, roughly 10 feet from the houseboat and 30 feet from the shore. This evidence led the authorities to conclude that the boys had fallen through the ice and met a tragic fate. Even though they were nearly convinced that the boys would be located in the river, the police undertook a thorough search of the entire town just to be safe. Over 100 police officers, firefighters, and local volunteers dispersed throughout Tarentum. They realized that if the boys had gotten lost outdoors, their odds of survival were exceedingly poor. The severe cold and biting winds posed a significant threat to anyone caught outside. At just 12 degrees, the wind made the situation feel even more unbearable. In the following 10 days, extensive searches took place in the river. A team of 35 divers from the U.S. Army Corps assisted the state police divers, and volunteers also arrived to help. Some officers suspected the boys were carried off by the river's current, whilst others thought their heavy clothing might have dragged them down and caught them on the river bottom, which is around 18 feet deep. Despite the efforts, none of the divers discovered any trace of the boys. In the end, with no indication that the boys were present and lacking definitive proof of their presence in the water, the search of the river was suspended. The police were hesitant to jeopardize the divers' safety, especially given the uncertainty surrounding Jon and Gabriel's situation. Nevertheless, the search efforts would continue in other forms. Regular aerial patrols of the river would be carried out by a police helicopter, and barge companies nearby were encouraged to stay alert for any strange happenings in the water. If they report any anomalies, divers would be sent back in to take a closer look. Both Jon and Gabriel understood the importance of staying away from the river, a rule they had never broken before. Their mothers were shocked that they would decide to challenge that rule on such a bitterly cold day. The witness who observed the boys playing by the river was unable to recognize Jon and Gabriel among the children she had seen. Both mothers felt angry that the FBI would not get involved in their case. At that time, the FBI only acted in missing children's cases if there was clear evidence of abduction, a ransom demand, or proof that a child had been taken across state lines. None of these factors were present in this case. The FBI did send the boys' pictures to the NCIC database, but that was the only action they took. With each passing month and the absence of any clues regarding the boys or their possessions, the detectives faced the painful truth that the chances of finding them alive were diminishing. No one could fathom that the two boys would choose to run away. They were well behaved and had no personal struggles that would lead them to take such a drastic step. Detectives held a strong conviction that the boys had passed, but they were unable to gather any concrete evidence to substantiate this claim. Therefore, the boys would still be recorded as missing children in the national database. In 1998, Neil B. Hammonds committed identity theft by assuming Jon's identity When he was pulled over by the police whilst driving, he presented a driver's license bearing Jon's name. The officer quickly recognized that Jon was listed as a missing person. However, since Hammonds was an adult, the officer had no grounds to detain him. He informed Jon's family, who were hopeful that their son had finally been located. It became clear that Hammonds was in search of a new identity and had selected Jon from a missing persons website that provided his details. He was not involved in Jon's disappearance, which, much like Gabriel's case, still remains a mystery. The home where Jon spent his childhood is still home to his family, with minimal evidence surrounding the boys' cases. Their disappearances are deemed non-family abductions. 8 years after Gabriel's disappearance, his family left the house where he vanished, and authorities have lost all communication with them. Jon was 11 years old at the time of his disappearance. He is a white male with brown hair and hazel eyes. He has a cleft in his chin and a small scar underneath his left eye. At age 11, he was 4'10" and weighed 70 pounds. He was last seen wearing blue jeans, a red sweatshirt, boots, a maroon and tan jacket, and red and white tasseled hat. Gabriel was 10 years old when he disappeared. He is a white male with brown hair and hazel eyes. He has a mole on his right wrist and a chip in his top right front tooth. At age 10, he was 4 foot tall and weighed about 60 pounds. He was last seen wearing jeans, boots, and a tasseled hat and a maroon jacket. Gabriel and Jon are probably lost to time, never to be found. Their parents will always be left with an aching curiosity about the events of that day for so many years past. Do you think Jon and Gabriel really drowned in the river, or do you believe they were picked up by a child deviant? Perhaps it was someone in the houseboat. Tell me your thoughts. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next Friday.